You ever see one of those mobile game ads where there's like 1,000 zombies running towards an outpost and you have to set up like turrets or whatever to take them out, and thought to yourself, I want to play that? Well, let me introduce you to Vampire Survivors. This mobile game turned viral sensation that I heard people talking about left, right, and center finally made its way to the big boy console of the Nintendo Switch a couple weeks ago. And after hearing so many people in my orbit ranting and raving about how this game was so good, quite possibly the best thing ever made, I knew I would have to check it out. With a charming art style reminiscent of the older Castlevania games, and basically everyone in my ears telling me it was a great time, my hater brain went into critical thinking overdrive. Surely this phone game couldn't actually be that fun. Well, shocker, it's actually that fun. Not only was I wrong, but I think this might be one of the most addicting gaming experiences I have ever had the pleasure of touching. I have a bit of a natural aversion to mobile games. As somebody who grew up with all the different Nintendo handhelds and is now the current owner of a Nintendo Switch, I was never big on playing games on the iPhone. Even when smartphone gaming took off and became a thing that everyone my age was doing, I was never that into it. When all the kids were playing Subway Surfers, I was playing Super Smash Bros. For 3DS. Not to be a gaming pick-me girl or anything, but I have always thought that if I'm going to game on the go, I own all these gaming devices, I might as well use the dedicated hardware for it. And this avoidance led to me never even really giving the critically acclaimed Vampire Survivors a fair shot. As this game began to rise in popularity online, I never gave it a second chance after I found out it was a mobile game that got ported to home consoles. I didn't want to play a phone game on Xbox, a phone game on the computer, and especially not a phone game on my phone, but with its release on the Nintendo Switch, I thought that was a perfect middle ground to explore Vampire Survivors. Cause after all, why would I play a free-to-start mobile game with the option to pay to unlock the full thing when I can pay $5 for that same game on the Nintendo Switch before I even give it a try? Vampire Survivors starts out in a very nonchalant way. You have one guy standing in a vast empty field shooting his lone projectile, and all you can do is use the joystick to move around. Enemies begin to come at you in a very horde mode-esque fashion, and when you defeat them, they drop XP crystals, and when you level up, you can get upgrades for your guy. Fairly standard core gameplay loop. But where Vampire Survivors really hooks you is in all the hidden bits of depth that aren't overtly explained to the player. Even before you unlock any of the new levels, weapons, or characters, there are so many tools given to the player that upon first glance seem remarkably simple, but as you play more and get more of a feel for the game, you realize that there's a lot more going on there. Each of the weapons has a very specific targeting pattern, none overlapping with each other, none of which allowing you to control where they fire individually of movements. And in single player, you can hold up to 6 different weapons, so you have to choose the ones that synergize best with each other. And speaking of synergizing, different upgrades can combo with different weapons to create even more powerful fused weapons that have different properties to them. Destroying objects in the environment can sometimes net you gold, which you can then use to upgrade this skill tree that provides a universal buff to all characters. Or when you unlock the merchant, you can use your gold to buy permanent or temporary upgrades for the character of your choice. You eventually unlock Arcana, tarot cards that give you different modifiers that you can equip up to 3 of per run. There's a wealth of different playable characters, and they all have different starting weapons, base stats, and abilities that upgrade over time, and while some of these overlap, no character is exactly the same as another, so there is variation there too. And while most of the different levels feel similar, they have enough different enemies, aesthetics, and movement obstacles for them to not all feel like skins for the same level. And if the open nature of the gameplay described seems like it's a little too much for you, the game also has a list of achievements for you to get that each unlock even more things. As I speak to you now, I have yet to get them all, but I am sure that there's even more mechanics at play to be discovered once I do. All of these elements take a game where the only thing you can truly control is your character's movement, and allow for there to be an insane amount of thought put behind the choices made for said character. Combine that strategic element with the immense satisfaction that naturally comes from destroying hordes upon hordes of enemies, and you have a game that I just cannot put down. And aside from the overwhelmingly positive feelings I have for the game itself, I also think it's great because this is a type of game that we don't get much anymore. Most games on a console, like say the 3DS, were designed for the portability of the system, delivering short bursts of game for those brief moments of respite in your otherwise busy day-to-day life. But with the advent of the hybrid Nintendo Switch and the blurring of the handheld console markets, this type of game has all but fizzled out on gaming hardware. We don't get handheld games anymore. We get console games that we can take on the go, which is cool, but it's not the same. The closest we get is the phone market, which oftentimes does get ported to Switch, much like the situation with Vampire Survivors here. And playing a game that is built to be played in small, short bursts like that evoked a nostalgic feeling in me that I hadn't felt in quite some time. If you're anything like me, with a brain that's too busy for its own good, that loves to sneak in some extra gaming time where you can, I wholeheartedly recommend Vampire Survivors. On the Nintendo Switch, it's $5 with a couple DLC maps available, and I'm not 100% sure what the pricing structure looks like over on mobile, but I have heard that you can at least start out the game for free, which there's no lower asking price, so I wholeheartedly encourage you to give it a shot. Also, the game has a co-op mode on console. I did not know how to integrate that bit into the script, but it's fun enough to mention, but it's not necessarily groundbreaking with the rest of the game in context, so shout out to my co-op team, I guess. See ya!